My name is Dharma Ackman, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area. And I welcome you to tonight's forum featuring candidates for Ann Arbor City Council. The candidates will be on the ballot in the primary election on Tuesday, August 8th. We are broadcasting this evening from the studios of the CTN in Ann Arbor. The League of Women Voters is pleased to be sponsoring these forums. The League is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that does not support candidates or parties, but we do take stands on issues that we have studied. One of the League's important goals is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls, and thus we bring you tonight's program. Volunteers from the League of Women Voters are facilitating tonight's forum. Our moderator this evening is Jillian Gainsley, who will explain the process from here.
Thank you. Welcome, and we're pleased to have everyone here tonight for this forum of Ward 1 City Council candidates for the City of Ann Arbor. The format for tonight, we will have a 1-minute opening statement by each candidate, followed by 90-second responses to our questions, and then a 2-minute closing statement by each candidate. Mr. Frenzel has been selected to go first, and we'll be alternating who answers each question along the way. Our questions tonight have come from citizens and residents of the City of Ann Arbor who have submitted questions. We were very pleased and wanted to thank everyone who submitted questions. There were 88 questions submitted, which was a new record for the League. And we wanted to acknowledge League members, CTN, the Civ City Initiative, and a group of Ann Arbor Pioneer High School students who all helped to raise awareness and get those questions in and select the questions for tonight. So we appreciate their civic engagement. And now we will move on to opening statements. And first is Mr. Frenzel.
Well, thank you very much for having us here this evening. Again, my name is Jason Frenzel. I'm one of the Ward 1 representatives for City Council currently. My background gives me a unique qualification to sit on City Council. Having grown up in Ann Arbor, attended Pittsfield Elementary School, Scarlett Middle School, and Huron High School, I understand our town very well. I also understand how our city works very well. I worked for the city for 10 years and have served on multiple boards and commissions. With the rhetoric that we hear coming from the national level at this point in time, we need strong local leaders who understand deeply complex situations. We need leaders who are collaborators, who bring our community together and work with all of our community members. I've done this work on your behalf and throughout my career, both as a representative, a professional, and as a citizen, and I look forward to serving into the future.
Hello?
Ms. Bannister.
Yes, hi. My name is Ann Bannister, and I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the viewers out in the audience, and Jason Frenzel for also being here tonight. I also grew up in Ann Arbor and attended Patton Gill, Tappan, Huron, and University of Michigan, and I'm a certified financial planner and personal finance educator. It was not on my radar to run for City Council, but with the sale of our public library lot, folks asked me to run, and so here I am, and I would like to be a positive turning point on council, where we think long-term about our vision for the city and not rush to approve buildings that are not harmonious with our existing neighborhoods and nurturing to our local business.
Thank you to both of our candidates. We'll move on to our first question, and Ms. Bannister is going to be starting. What is the one best way for the city to increase its revenue so that it can maintain or improve city services to all residents? And why is this the best way?
Well, that's a good question. I think that a good way to increase our revenue is to look carefully at our budget priorities and make sure we're focusing on citizen priorities, such as our basic services and infrastructure. And as I think there are ways that we could live within our means by spending less money on administrative costs and consultant fees, and still provide and improve our infrastructure and our roads and sewers and work on our threats to our environment, such as the Gelman plume and those sort of things.
Thank you, Ms. Bannister. We'll move on to Mr. Frenzel. The same question, what is the one best way for the city to increase its revenue so it can maintain or improve city services, and why is this the best way?
Thank you for the clarification on that.
Thanks.
As with most of your questions, it's a complex answer. Obviously, the most readily available to us is increasing our tax base. As we know, our tax base drastically declined in the 2008 both economic downturn as well as Pfizer leaving our town, and that tax base going over to a non-taxable entity who we love also. As that tax base increases, we are slowly rebuilding our city. We drastically reduced our staffing from upwards of 1,200 staff down to under 700 during that time. That allocation of staff was done disproportionately through early layoffs, early buyouts, and now we're rebuilding that in a very methodical way that I think is very important for us to be intentional about. Not too dissimilarly, we can advocate on getting better and stronger state revenue tax sharing. I have been working with our state elected representatives to ensure that the state is looking forward to that into the future. They have drastically also reduced state revenue sharing to local municipalities, which is why we see so many cities and school boards going into receivership as of late. And also, of course, making sure that we constantly have an eye on the efficiencies of our organization, be it on the ground, in paving roads, or within the organization on staffing levels. We need to continually look to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Frenzel. We'll move on to our second question, and Mr. Frenzel will start. City Council voted to go forward with the sale of development rights and of 360 parking spaces for as long as 50 years on the publicly owned library lot to a private Chicago firm. The Downtown Development Authority, or DDA, is considering plans to raise rates for monthly permits and on-street meters, as well as spending $18 million for additional parking spaces in a downtown structure. How did you, or how would you have voted on the library lot sale, and why? And what advice would you give to the DDA in cost-effectively and equitably managing the city's parking system?
It's fabulous. The decision on the library lot certainly was far more complicated than people give it right to. What I heard as a representative from our constituents was far more balanced, lots of people that were on all sides of this issue for many different reasons, and weighing all of those component conversations, be them representatives of organizations or the hundreds and hundreds of individuals that contacted us, were all very important to me. When I looked at the sale of the lot and most of the issues that were brought forward as concerns, and worked with my colleagues both at the DDA, within the city, and with the county, I identified solutions to a multitude of the issues that were brought forward, and I thought that being able to resolve most of those issues before the construction of that facility was finished drastically reduced a lot of the concerns, not all of them certainly, the parking certainly being one of them. I immediately reached out to, when I was put on, when I got onto City Council, I immediately reached out to peers at the county as well as the DDA to identify ways that we could resolve the parking issue as soon as possible, ideally before the implementation of that facility was finished and that those parking spots were allocated. In fact, the conversation about having the county identify additional parking on their own property had not been a priority before at the County Commission, and it is actively being discussed now. So I believe that we can resolve those issues as time goes on.
Thank you, Mr. Frenzel. Just to clarify, how did you vote on that?
I ended up voting for it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Bannister, we'll ask you the same question. I'll skip the preamble since I think you're very familiar with the topic. So how did you or how would you have voted on the library lot sale and why? And what advice would you give to the DDA in cost-effectively and equitably managing the city's parking system?
Well, this issue to sell the library lot, I think, is sort of a poster child for some of the rush to development that we are experiencing in the city. I think that most all of the Ward 1 voters do support development. We just want development that is harmonious with our existing neighborhoods and also nurturing of our local businesses. With regards to the parking, I think that to sell the library lot for $10 million in April and then to turn around in about 2 months later and suggest that we might need $18 million just to replace those similar amount of parking spots that we sold leaves many of us scratching our head that that might not be responsible use of our limited financial resources. So I think the city can do better, that Ann Arbor deserves better, and needs a closer look at these sort of development projects that favor developers over the existing neighborhoods and businesses that we have here. And so I think that's important that we're also creating a precedent and possibly a domino effect where we may not recognize our charming city in a few short years if we don't change this balance and this thinking on City Council.
Thank you so much. Our next question, we'll start with Ms. Bannister. In 2015, the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission recommended the establishment of an independent civilian police review board. The city has hired a law enforcement consulting firm to audit police community relations. What features of a civilian oversight board do you think are critical for effectiveness, and which you would support as a council member?
Yes, I have heard about this civilian oversight board, and I think it sounds like a very good idea for Ann Arbor. I think that we will wait to see what comes out of the audit of the police department and see exactly what the power and features of this group would be. But I think a neutral outside board providing some checks and balances to our police would be in keeping with our community values and also a good governance for our city and our role as a leader in the state of Michigan and around the country with regards to civilian oversight of our law enforcement. I think it's in keeping with our community values, and I will look forward to seeing a result of the police audit and moving forward on it as designed.
Great, thanks for your answer. Mr. Frenzel, the question again is about a civilian police review board. What features of a civilian oversight board do you think are critical for effectiveness, and which would you support as a council member?
Fabulous. Just to start off, I'd like to mention Chief Baird specifically in this conversation. Through one-on-one conversations and as well as through the budget process, I have found our chief, the leader of our department, to be very accessible and interested in the report and what that outputs. In fact, he has leaned towards us and asked to not increase staffing, police staffing at this point, in hopes that the recommendations coming out will be other types of strengths on the force, be it social work or other ride-alongs, structural elements within the department, which I think are critical. Over the last handful of weeks and months, it has, as Hillard Hines has moved forward with their interviewing of staff and city council and residents, it has become increasingly clear that a third-party outside organization is starting to have challenges reaching certain portions of our community. It is very hard to grapple with and grab people who don't want to be seen or who feel ostracized by the police. And I think it is very important that some of us, especially myself on council, have been pushing both that organization forward in moving those issues forward and including those voices, but also to ensure that they get heard well. The board itself, I think, plays a critical role in both a check and balance process as well as a transparency process. Our boards and commissions in general do a great job of activating our citizens and allowing them to participate in the government. And doing that directly and in a meaningful way is critical to this process.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question. A 2015 study on affordability and economic equity commissioned by Washtenaw County found that there's an affordability imbalance between Ann Arbor and the eastern side of the county. The study recommended an additional 3,139 non-student affordable rental units in the next 20 years. What do you feel the city can do to address this housing affordability imbalance? And we'll begin with Mr. Frenzel.
Yeah. I think that it is also important to take a step back from this conversation and recognize that affordable housing is perpetuated by market forces in the housing industry. We are paying the price of amazing successes here in town. People want to move here, and we do have a lot of students who are moving here also. Those pressures put upward pressure on our housing costs, and to balance that, we need to use market forces to allow a release valve to that pressure. That said, I am extremely proud that with the library lot decision, we put $5 million into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That money is critical at this time, especially given the rhetoric we hear coming from the national administration. We are very fearful that our HUD funding is going to get cut significantly, and so having that money available to us to ride out the next few years is going to be critical. I'm also very proud that we just in recent weeks identified and put forward a resolution to increase or hold on to upwards of $1 million of subsidized housing funding over the next 10 years. Being able to have a long-term funding source for subsidized housing is going to be critical, both through the next 4 years, but also in perpetuity. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Bannister, the study recommended an additional 3,139 affordable rental housing units in the next 20 years. What can the city do to address the imbalance in housing affordability?
Well, I think that the city needs to take a close look at what are our housing priorities and what demographic do we want to provide affordable housing to. Right now, we are providing our various solutions for Section 8 housing, and those are possibly threatened at the federal level. So we need to relook at this. I think that the Ward 1 residents are saying that if affordability is a goal of our city, we shouldn't be fueling too many luxury housing developments that will undermine our affordability and lead to proceeding with luxury developments that force many of our long-standing residents and children to move away from Ann Arbor. So I think the main thing we need to do is have a serious discussion at the city level as to what are our housing priorities and who do we want to provide affordable housing to, and then take action from that. I'm not convinced that the $5 million from the sale of the lot is necessarily going to make it into the affordable housing system.
Thank you. We will move on to our next question and begin again with Ms. Bannister. Much of the University of Michigan campus is located in Ward 1. What challenges and opportunities does that create, and how would you represent students' concerns on council?
Yes. Well, I think that City Council needs to work closely with our relationship with the university, and because when the university buys up properties like on State Street, the Edwards Brothers lot, then it becomes off of our tax rolls. So we need to work closely with that and work so that the students can have places to live. And I think the university is has built quite a few new places for them to live. So the students, I think, are looking for affordable housing and finding that it's not affordable even at their low income levels. So I would like to work with the students and hear more from them about their concerns and see if we can not tear down some of our affordable housing that makes it even harder for them to live here, and force them to live in other communities to commute here to the city. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Frenzel, what challenges and opportunities does the University of Michigan's presence in the ward create, and how would you represent students' concerns on council?
The gorilla in the room, as it were. Well, I started with the top. When I was running for council, I went and knocked on the president's door, and he answered, and we had a nice little chat. I find working with people at multiple levels of the government, no matter if it's pseudo-state government or the city government, is completely reasonable. We're all humans, and approaching humans as such is very useful. My time on staff at the city led me to understand very much so that the staff-to-staff relations between the organizations, the city government and the University of Michigan, tend to be very productive and open. There have been times in our past where the political dynamics between city council and the regents haven't always been positive, and that's sort of gotten in the way of those staff-to-staff relations. So working on a positive relationship between organizations at all levels is critical. As it relates to students, I am led to understand that housing costs, because of the increase in supply that we have been offered by private development in the last handful of years, some of those more expensive housing units have come down drastically, upwards of, on occasion, $900 per month for students. So the market process is working very well. I'm also really proud that we moved forward our term changes for city council members from 2 years to 4 years. On even year elections, we have a much higher voter turnout than on odd year elections. That's only one in many, many steps to increase voter turnout, especially related to students.
Thank you. Ms. Bannister, oh, excuse me, you already answered that question. We are going to, this is going to be our final question, question number 6, and we'll start with Mr. Frenzel. How would you evaluate and enforce recent regulation changes to protect pedestrians and bicyclists?
Again, lots of different component parts to this project and to these initiatives. And they're also iterative in nature because we're both changing what our streets look like and we're changing how we think about how we use our streets. So holding all those things at the same time is critical. We are moving forward and have moved forward a suite of different pedestrian safety issues, especially related to school zones. We've posted decreased school limits at all of our schools. We are actively improving crosswalks at all of the schools, especially this year in the locations that are adjacent to higher speed roads. Think of Huron High School. Over the course of the next year or two, we will be implementing that in all of our residential neighborhoods in the schools that don't border on busier roads. So those are critical improvements. You may have noticed the rumble strips at the sidewalk's edge. That's a way to make pedestrian safety for those who are visually impaired. A critical important step forward. As it relates to bikeability, the paving, the laying down of bike lanes has been an instrumental step in our evolution to understanding that roads are multimodal for all users. Our next critical step is installing a few pilot locations for bike separated lanes. So there's a curb between the road and the sidewalk, between the road and the bike lane. Once we get there, then sort of the world's our oyster in moving forward best management practices that are seen around the world.
Thank you. Ms. Bannister, how would you evaluate and enforce recent regulation changes to protect pedestrians and bike riders?
Yes, well, I support transportation safety, and I would like to see improved lighting and better crosswalks at better locations, and to see that they are consistently marked and with good lighting, and so that protects not only the bicyclists and the pedestrians, but also the cars that are driving around. We may also need more police officers for targeted traffic enforcement to protect the pedestrians there. And I think this also helps with our climate change goals, because if we have safe places for pedestrians and cars and, pedestrians and bicycles, then we encourage people to use those more green ways to get to where they need to go. I think that, again, the street lighting is needed, and so it's back to common sense budget priorities, and I think public safety is a #1 priority for us. So this would be a good thing for us to look at to make sure everything is safe for the pedestrians and the bicycles, and that will also help our environment and our climate change goals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to move on to our closing statements. We'll ask Ms. Bannister to go first, followed by Mr. Frenzel, and we'll finish up. Ms. Bannister, your closing statement.
Okay. Well, as we stated earlier, I grew up in Ann Arbor and am a financial planner and a financial educator, which I think are good skills to bring to City Council. I think that I have always been a good liaison for my clients, helping to represent their best interests, and that is the same thing I would like to do with Ward 1 residents, listening to the residents and voicing their concerns. I got my start in politics by being Yusuf Rabi's treasurer while he was on county commissioner, and his mother, Peggy Rabi, is now my campaign chair. I would like to, again, to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here tonight, and for my friend Jason Frenzel here. I hope that folks will vote for Ann Bannister on August 8th. I ask for your vote. I'd like to be a champion for Ann Arbor values, for harmonious development that is in keeping with our existing neighborhoods and our nurturing to our businesses. And I would also like to work for transparency in our local government and protecting our river from the dioxin plume, and public safety, especially with regards to our school children, and repairing our neglected streets and sewers, and make sure, again, on the development with regards to our infrastructure, taking into account that increased development puts added strain on our roads and our sewers and our traffic and our gridlock. So we need to be very responsible, and I look forward to listening to the voters and responding to them. Please vote for Ann on August 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bannister. We'll move on to closing statement from Mr. Frenzel.
We made it. That was great. First, I wanted to thank you all for the opportunity to be here. I think that these forums are a critical component to our local democracy in action. So thank you to the League and CTN for supporting us. As we know, the government is a complex organization. Even our current president has finally realized that. It has been my life's work to make sure that we do not oversimplify issues when we're talking to residents. Oversimplifying issues, to me, creates disenfranchisement and disempowerment. It also leads to us versus them mentality that we do not need in our community. Be it related to municipal budgeting or how zoning and development works, our residents have the capacity and deserve to understand the complexities of these issues. And I have the ability to articulate them to our residents and have worked to do so. Over the past few months, I have continued my life's work to both empower and advocate on behalf of our residents. We, at this point in time, especially now, need leaders who see the multitude of perspectives in our communities, find deeper solutions to complex issues. We need to protect and support all of our residents, be them LGBTQ&I, people of color, or the old and young alike. We need to fight a movement that's happening at both of our state and national level, which puts our residents in peril, be it related to climate change or immigration enforcement. We need to support our staff here in Ann Arbor and hold them to high standards, especially as it's related to development and policing. I've been working on all these issues on your behalf for quite a few months now, and look forward to doing so into the future with your support and your participation. You can find my contact information on my website, and I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of the candidates for taking the time to be here with us tonight. It's so important to have the opportunity to speak directly to voters and give people a new way to find out information about who their candidates are. So we very much appreciate your being here.
Yes, thank you to the candidates for participating in tonight's forum, and to CTN for making this program possible. These forums will be rebroadcast on Channel 19 a number of times between now and the election, and are available on demand for streaming on your computer or smartphone. Go to our website, lwvannarbor.org, and look for the link to the programs. For additional balanced, nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, go to vote411.org and enter your address. There you will find information on the candidates and ballot proposals that will appear on your ballot. Be sure to vote on Tuesday, August 8th. Good night.